Stay tuned after the episode for an update on the Boundary Waters in our recent And Then What. Marco, we've managed to set up our computers, even though the technology world is trying to foil us today.
It only took us 20 minutes.
I know. It's like coaching a grandparent through something. Jesus. We've got a cool story today.
Yeah, we have a really fantastic interview with a guy named Justin Krompier. He's a landscape photographer, adventurer, van lifer to some extent, and I don't think he would call himself this, but I think he is somewhat of an influencer. I think his Instagram certainly influences people.
Yeah, he knows how to tell a story
for sure.
Online. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and actually, Fitz, you were the one who kind of brought up this idea in the first place to track Justin down and get him on a mic, so I'm curious what sparked the idea to want to interview him.
Yeah, I can't remember how exactly I came to connect with Justin, but it was like kind of one of those random wormholes that sometimes I will follow down on the internet. And it was like comments, and we traded some DMs, and I don't know, I just kind of followed along on Justin's journey for a long time. And I was, that it's wild because I think good stories, they allow you to have empathy for somebody else's perspective or somebody else's path through life. And I think great stories allow you to not just have empathy or to kind of like walk in someone else's shoes for a moment, but they make you think, what would I do? Given those set of circumstances or those sets of situations, how would I have reacted? What choices would I have made? And, would I have the strength? And that's powerful. Watching along as Justin was deeply open about his own struggles with addiction, with his own, ability to kind of like go through a series of really bad choices and then go through a series of making really good decisions. Like, I can't relate to Justin's story, but there's one moment in it where he makes a decision. And he makes a decision to kind of believe in himself. And that, to me, I can relate to that. And it's a powerful moment that I think a lot of us can resonate with.
I'm Marco Siler Gonzalez.
I'm Fitz Gall, and you're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
Just a heads up, this episode may not be suitable for children as it contains mature themes, discussion of drug use, and explicit language.
I'm Justin Krompier, and I introduce myself typically as a landscape and lifestyle photographer from New Jersey. New Jersey is the epicenter of all adventure and great landscapes, obviously. But no, growing up in New Jersey, New Jersey is a really interesting place to grow up because it kind of has like a little bit of everything, truly. It has ocean, it has, obviously New York City is very closer if you're in South Jersey, Philadelphia, and it does have the Appalachian Mountains run through it. So where I grew up, I was kind of in the middle of all three of those things, and I was like very close to New York State, not a terribly far drive to like Vermont or upstate New York and the Adirondacks and stuff. So like it was a good place to grow up in that way, be exposed to all those different things. I was born in 90, and like when I grew up, like we were just like outside and like in the woods and, a lot of skateboarding and snowboarding and mountain biking and like a lot of extreme sports. Tony Hawk was like the man back then, and we played, when Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 came out, that was like all we did was like play Tony Hawk and then go outside and skate or like watch skate videos and then try to go out and replicate it, and everyone was getting hurt. And like in the summer we skated and we rollerbladed, we played football, I was like outside my whole childhood. It was, aside from like Tony Hawk, like I said, and like some of those kind of video games, like I was outside, and I always loved being outside. And I think most of us did. Most of my friends, that's what we did,
Did the camera become a part of that? Like, just like, when did that enter into your world? Was that something that like came in the teenage years too?
The camera didn't become a thing until high school, and it was like this big question of like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And everyone was getting ready to commit to schools, and I'm going into business, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And here's me, I had like no idea what I wanted to do. I just wanted to play and have fun. But in high school, the only class that I could pay attention in was the mass media class. It was like the filmmaking class. And I don't know if it was the teachers that I had or they just kind of gave us free rein to create stuff. They'd give us an assignment and they'd say, this is your assignment, create a sci-fi or something. And we'd go out and we'd have fun with that. And I loved it. I would skip football practice. Now, I didn't want to go to football practice anyway because it was tough. It was awful, and I loved football, but I would skip it because I would be in the editing suite. I'd be editing. We had like state of the art for high school film and video production and TV production classes. We had like a full studio. I ended up going to film school, and I always wanted to be a filmmaker. That's what I really wanted to do my whole life.
Justin followed his passion for photography and mixed media, enrolling in a prominent film school nearby. He also picked up production assistant work on film sets in New York City with the aspirations of joining the Directors Guild of America.
I was definitely given every opportunity to succeed in my life. Like when I started young, like I had internships. I interviewed with the New York Giants, like I think before I even got out of high school. Like I was like, I had opportunities. I was working as a PA in New York City on union sets. I was trying to put my book together to get into the DGA.
Like so many kids in the first years of college, Justin was going out with friends and partying in his free time. And for a moment, Justin was able to keep those two worlds separate. Work hard on a set, blow off steam with his buddies afterwards. But by his sophomore year, Justin's control began to slip.
I started really getting heavy into pills and opiates and drugs. And so that derailed everything. I mean, that derailed my whole life. My whole life just pretty much ended, and my full-time job became, heroin addict, which growing up, I never thought that was going to be a thing. And that's just kind of how addiction goes, essentially what starts as something really fun and kind of exciting. You're partying, you're having fun with your friends, you're experimenting, and all of a sudden it's a full-time job, and it gets very dark very quickly. So it wasn't just the camera or my dreams that got put on hold. I mean, it was my whole life got put on hold.
That time marked the start of a 5-year run of heavy drug use. Justin dropped out of film school, moved back in with his parents in New Jersey. His whole life, his priorities, dreams, passions, they completely changed within a matter of months.
From the minute you wake up, if you're in active addiction, your only thought is, how am I going to get more? Because that clock is ticking until you start getting dope sick, until you start going into acute withdrawals. That's a feeling that that addicts will run from and do pretty much anything to avoid, because it's that painful. It's physically really painful, but it's like the mental thing, and it's a mental obsession. So essentially from the time I woke up until the time I went to sleep, all I was thinking about was finding ways and means to get more drugs, to get my drug of choice. And there's nothing that comes above that. That's why they call it a disease. And I know there's a lot of discussion about whether or not addiction is a disease, but it really is a mental juggernaut, kicked off by a physical compulsion. So when someone says it was a full-time job, I mean, like literally you wake up and you're figuring out like, who do I have to rob from or steal or rip off, or what do I got to do in order to get money, in order to get more, and that's Groundhog's Day every single day. That's all you think about. There is no break from that. That's how I lived my life for a long time, and sadly, that's how a lot of people are walking around living their lives, and you just kind of take that as normal. At a certain point, you cross a threshold, and that is just normal. And like I said, you wake up one day, and if you're coherent enough, you might think like, how did I get here? At that point, it's like you're already in it. It's like too late almost, anybody that has somebody in their life that they love that they're watching struggle with addiction, it's such a helpless feeling because you want so badly to help them, and most people don't know how to help an addict that's in active addiction. The way I got out of active addiction was, it's funny. I have a relative that I grew up partying with. We're the same age, and we didn't grow up together. But whenever we would visit one another, we were always partying, right? And as we went through the years, he progressed in his life like a typical. You go to college, you get a job. Eventually, maybe you buy a house, you meet a girl or a boy, and you kind of there's like a progression that's kind of typical. And then there was me. I was living at home. I had thrown every opportunity I ever had down the drain. I could not function without drugs. I probably hadn't showered in about a week or two. It's this time of year, it's the holidays. That cousin comes up to visit, right? And he had gifts for all the kids in the family. He had a job. He had a girlfriend. He just bought a house. And then there was me. And I remember my cousins were all kind of talking, and my uncle was there. They were all kind of talking about stocks or this, really, really adult stuff, it sounded like. And I had just blown a line in the bathroom. I had nothing to offer, and something about that comparison of seeing my cousin and where he was at in his life, even though he was able to drink, socially and party here and there, he had all this stuff. He had his life together, and then there was me. And for years, the thing with addiction is it's a disease of denial, and for me, that moment, something about seeing the way it all came together, maybe the holidays and whatever it was, I realized that the difference between me and that person, finally it hit me, was that I'm an addict and that person might not be an addict. That's the difference. I am fundamentally different than that person. When I put a drink or a drug in my body, it reacts differently than somebody that can, have a beer or, a glass of wine or smoke weed or whatever your thing is. I can't do that, and as an addict, you run from that forever while you're in active addiction because you're like, well, what do you mean? I can't have a toast at my wedding. I can't have a beer with the guys. You try to figure out any which way to just be normal, and in that moment, I finally recognized that I am different. And that is that surrender and acceptance that I have a problem. This is something that I cannot do. It changed my whole life, and right before that admission that I made to myself, my sister, my cousin, and I went to go see the movie Wild with Reese Witherspoon about Cheryl Strayed when she hikes the PCT and everything. And I deeply resonated with that story. I just remember watching this person and watching this movie, right, about nature, which I love, and I love hiking, and I love the outdoors, and I always dreamed about what it would be like to go out west, and see these places with my own two eyes. And I remember watching that movie in the theaters, on drugs, and thinking, how did I get here? Because that would have been a dream for me. And I always dreamed to do like I said, the AT runs through my home state. So I there were many times where I was like, I'm going to do the AT. And so watching this film about this person hiking the PCT, I remember so distinctly sitting in that theater in Montclair, New Jersey, and thinking, that will never be me, call it unlucky or whatever you want to call it, or I screwed my life up, or, it's all my fault. I just remember thinking that will never be me because I can't stop using. I couldn't fathom waking up on a trail with a backpack full of your stuff because I needed to have this pill and this medication and this drug on me just to function. So I couldn't imagine just waking up and starting to hike. I couldn't even get up and go to the shower. It was too much for me. So watching that film and then seeing my cousin, I finally realized I have a problem. My life is not where I ever envisioned it to be. I don't know how I can get out of it, but I finally can see that I'm an addict. And I made that admission to myself, and like I felt it in my soul. You know, we make an admission. To admit means to let it in. Like on a movie ticket, it says admit one. It's I let it in finally to my soul. And so that decision changed my life.
Where do you go from there? Because I imagine that the next steps must be equally difficult in their own way.
Yeah, because you know what? The thing with addiction is like that window of willingness and open-mindedness is so small. I mean, you have like a tiny fraction of like, okay, I want help.
Justin's family acted quickly, and within a week, Justin was admitted to a rehab close to his home.
Typically, rehabs are about 28 days. And depending on your situation, when you get there, you're probably detoxing for like the first week or two. For me, they got me on a medication that's like a low dose opiate that kind of helps to like wean you off so that the acute withdrawal is not as bad. You know, it was a haze. Like I don't remember a whole lot. You know, when I got there, I was 235 pounds. My blood sugar levels were through the roof. Like I was borderline diabetic because I ate so much chocolate and cake and stuff when I was using. I took zero care of my body at all. And I just remember feeling so uncomfortable. Like everything was, I was like socially awkward. Like I felt very exposed, you know, physically I felt sick. But I was surrounded by people that were in the same boat. And that's like really, really important, at least for me. And that was one of the things that I was like, I need to go to rehab because I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I had tried. And so just being in that setting with other people that were also going through the same thing that I was going through was really helpful because there were people that had it a little bit better than me and there were people that had it way worse than me. Like there was this kind of like group camaraderie, like we're kind of all in the same life raft, you know, kind of thing. And recovery itself is a lot like that. It's like we speak a different language because we've been there, you know, like we all survived the same boat, you know, wreck, and we're all on the life raft together kind of thing. It started out, I was just going to detox and then I was going to leave and go back home. And my counselor said, well, why don't you stay in another week? Why don't you just take the weekend to think about it? Over the course of my rehab, I kept doing that. It was like, all right, I'll stay an extra week, you know. Why don't you go to a halfway house, you know, when you get out? No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And so my whole experience was like this slowly becoming more and more open-minded and more willing, you know, until I left because my insurance kicked me out. You know, I wanted to stay, you know, and that's the thing when you're getting ready to leave and you know you're about to be discharged and go back out into the real world, it's really scary, you know, because you're in this safe space, you know, you're removed from society. They tell you when to eat. They tell you where you're going to go every day. And now you have this freedom again. And so I was nervous. I was scared, you know, to go back out in the real world because I knew, you know, I've been here before and it didn't work out, you know, and I was in worse shape, you know, the next time around than I was when I went to rehab last time. But in that 28-day period, I went from I'm just here to detox and I'm going home to please don't make me go, and okay, I'll go live in a halfway house with other people that are getting out of institutions that are also in recovery.
At the halfway house, Justin's life became regimented. There was no room for deviation outside a strict routine of going to work, hitting the gym, and attending a 12-step program.
In the beginning, I had so much willingness and open-mindedness that, you know, if you told me to stand in the corner on my head, I really would have done it. You know, I was so done with that way of life and I was so scared of going back to it. And I had finally admitted that my best thinking had gotten me here, that I was willing to do whatever it took to maybe have a different outcome, you know. They say insanity is like doing the same thing over and expecting different results. Well, like addiction is just pure insanity, you know, and even removing the drugs, you realize that insanity is still there, because it's a disease of the mind. The drugs were never the problem. I don't have a problem with drugs. I have a problem with me. I have a problem with my thinking. Drugs for me was the solution. It helped me shut off the negative thoughts, the loops that were going on in my brain 24/7. It was a way to quiet my mind and feel okay with myself. And so when I got clean, I entered this program where I was trying to rewire that, and learn a whole new way of living, and as a result, of actually doing the work, I embarked on this like beautiful journey, and that was really the foundation, was those first few years of just pure recovery, and I would have done whatever you told me to do. And I'm so glad that I did that, and I'm still like that. There's no part of me ever that thinks, well, I got this because it's been 11 years. I'm one bad decision, one bad day, one bad moment away from thinking that, you know what, a drink sounds like a good idea, and for me, my alcohol bone is connected to my cocaine bone, and my cocaine bone is connected to my heroin bone, and that's why I abstain entirely, because I'm one bad decision away to going right back to where I started.
After the break, Justin rekindles his old dreams. Stay with us. All right, here we go. Yep, I just signed up for a trail marathon in late March. That will get me moving through the dark, rainy, cold Seattle winter. There will be mud, there will be puddles. So it's also time for some new Darn Tough running socks. For over 40 years, Darn Tough has been making socks in Vermont with yarn sourced from America and around the world. They pride themselves on using merino wool, which is super comfortable, to create a durable sock. And they back it up with an unconditional guarantee for life. If these aren't the longest lasting socks you've ever owned, return them for another pair. Things I like. Dude, they're comfortable. They have a variety of styles to choose from. There's quarter, crew, no show. There's different cushioning patterns, so if I want something super light for a race, I choose. And they're just nice merino wool socks that take care of my feet. So it's a new year, it's a new race, same me, but new socks. Darn Tough is offering free shipping on any order to Diaries listeners. Use the code DIRTBAG at checkout. We'll put a link in the show notes, or visit darntough.com to find your new favorite pair of socks. Your feet deserve it. Thanks to Darn Tough for supporting the show. And support comes from Kuat Racks. When the temperature drops and the sky starts dropping those fluffy flakes, it's time to throw the grip on the car. Because that first pow day, it happened yesterday. The slide-out tray makes loading and unloading easy, so it's easier to get your stuff on top of the car. It's kind of a pain in the ass to do in ski boots, but this makes it easy. And with 2 sizes holding up to 6 sets of skis or 4 snowboards, the grip makes heading to the mountain a party. Life's always better with friends, right? And like all of the products, the grip ski and snowboarding racks are covered by the No Worries limited warranty. So whether you're on the road or the mountain, we've got your rack and your back. Kuat, because you love your gear. Everybody hikes. No matter what sport you're doing out there, you're going to do a little hiking. It's awesome. Moving through the woods, spending time on the trail with a friend, with a family member, even a new friend. Oboz Footwear knows nothing in the world unifies the human-nature connection more than the shared love of hiking. Oboz set up camp in the legendary hiking and backpacking hub of Bozeman, Montana. With millions of acres of peaks, valleys, rivers, and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem in their backyard, Oboz has made the most out of its natural R&D lab. They create footwear that delivers unmatched fit, unrivaled feel, and exceptional performance to give you the tools you need to get out there and really love hiking. To find your next pair of footwear, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. Thanks, Oboz, for supporting the show. So if you know me, you know I'm not one for resolutions, but I like setting goals. I see a difference in those two things. So every year I think I want to spend time with friends on skin tracks as snow falls. I want to run as many miles as I can on trail, bike pack in places I haven't been before, climb with my kids, do all these things. And sometimes in my hectic world, that means I end up missing out on meals or trying to like scrap calories from a gas station, which is not ideal. I've got a little hack. Kachava's whole body meal shakes keep my body and mind nourished. With 2 scoops of Kachava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. So not only am I getting 25 grams of plant-based protein, I'm also getting adaptogens and supergreens at the same time. Kachava has simplified my approach to nutrition. Instead of eating things I don't really like on the run, I rely on Kachava to power me up. Rewild your nutrition at Kachava.com and use the code DIARIES. New customers get $20 off an order of 2 or more bags now through the 31st of January. That's Kachava, Kachava.com, code DIARIES. So eventually Justin felt like his life was resetting back to a sense of normalcy. He picked up a job as a UPS driver to make ends meet, and he made new friends with folks in his 12-step program.
Early recovery was cool because it was like I was relearning life again. It had been years since I had even like laughed. Like you don't think about that, but that's the reality. Like I remember the first time I had this like gut busting laughter with my friends, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so good. Like I forgot what this feels like to just think something so funny that I am uncontrollably laughing.
At what stage did you find yourself kind of starting to go out back on the hikes and then picking back up the camera?
It was, probably around 2016 and 17. I didn't even have Instagram. My one buddy goes, you're into like, photography and filmmaking and all this stuff. Like, you should check this app out. It's like a lot of people posting lots of like really cool photos of like hikes and stuff. And I thought that's so stupid. Everybody just like posts pictures of their lunch and their dinner and their cat on this app. Like, why would I want that? I literally didn't understand the point of Instagram at the time. I thought it was so silly. But I was open-minded enough and I checked it out and I was like, holy smokes, like this is like, and I got to see parts of the world like right on my phone that I'd never gotten to see before. And I started thinking like, that's, I have a camera and I love to go hiking. Like, I want to take my camera on hikes too and photograph some of the stuff that I'm doing. So I started seeing photographers on Instagram taking these pictures of these places that I couldn't even like dream about, being from New Jersey. That planted a seed of like pairing a camera with nature.
Justin took what he learned in film school and started applying it to his outdoor photography.
Something about landscapes just like really spoke to me. And that's obviously shifted over the years where now I'm into, and I've shot all kinds of stuff, but there was something really adventurous about a landscape photo for me. It was like driving somewhere, maybe getting some sleep, and starting to hike at like 3:30 in the morning, in like 0-degree weather to be on top of a mountain when the sun comes up. And like you don't even know if it's going to be very good or if the sun's even going to come out. And there was just it was just so exciting to me to do that, and I became like hooked. We used to go up to the Adirondacks to do it and Maine to shoot, and I had friends at the time that, they were just normal guys from, the AA and NA that I went to. And we would go camping and I'd be like, we got to go to sleep because I want to be on top of Algonquin when the sun rises. And it was like 6 p.m. and I was like, we got to go to sleep. And they were like, Justin, I love that you're like into all this and you're doing all this and it's so cool. But I think you got to get some friends that also really like this stuff because I don't give a shit about waking up at 3 in the morning to hike a mountain, dude. Like, I'll go at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., sure, I'll go hiking with you. But like, I think you need to find some friends that are into this sort of thing.
Justin took the not-so-subtle hint. After accruing enough vacation days, Justin and his girlfriend at the time went to California and rented out a Volkswagen camper. Over 10 days, they drove and camped from Yosemite to Big Sur.
It was like one of the last nights of our trip. I'd shot the sunset at Sand Dollar Beach in Big Sur. My girlfriend was sleeping in the van, and I was laying on a picnic table at the campground right outside of Sand Dollar Beach. And like the ocean, I could hear like the waves crashing. I was looking up at the stars, and I knew that this trip was about to end. And it was like the best trip ever. And I just remember thinking, it was the same voice that said, when I finally admitted that I had a problem and that I needed to get help, there was a little voice in my head that said on repeat, just go to rehab, just go to rehab, just go to rehab. And that for me, I call that my intuition, my higher power, whatever. That same voice was going, there's no way you can go back to UPS. And within a month, I had put my 2 weeks in. I said, I can't. I hate my job, and I do this 10 hours a day, and I don't like this at all. This is not me. And I was miserable, and I used to listen to the Dirtbag Diaries, and it was like, so I had this head full of adventure, and it was like a transcendental meditation for me, honestly. Like, I don't know if you guys realize how important your podcast is, but like I would listen to those stories and be so inspired. And I would think, one day I'm not going to be sitting in this truck. And one day I'm going to do this stuff. I'm going to go pack rafting. I'm going to climb in Yosemite. I'm going to, backpack in Washington. I'm going to surf in, San Diego and Southern California. I'm going to do these things. I don't know how, but one day that's going to be a thing. And it was because I was surrounded by it. Every day I was listening to these cool stories, and just like when I got clean, I was juxtaposing it to like what my life actually looked like. And there was a huge gap there that I knew, well, if you want that, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to make a change. So it's just like when I wanted to get clean and I watched the movie Wild, I was listening to the Dirtbag Diaries, but my life wasn't like that. And I knew that I would have to make a decision that was going to alter the rest of my life if I wanted that. I really wanted to, have this adventurous life and be outside. And instead, like, I did this job that I hated because it was like, that's what everyone said I should do, because it was like really safe and secure, good benefits, solid pay, pension, 401k. But now I'm about to die anyway, and none of that means anything to me. And I told my union shop steward, old school Jersey guy, been a UPS driver for decades. And I thought he was going to make fun of me when I was like, yeah, I want to be a photographer. I'm going to quit my job. And he said something equally as powerful. He said, Justin, there's so many things that I wanted to do with my life, and I didn't do them because I stuck with this job, and I took the safe route. And now I'm too old to do any of them. And I live with that regret every day. That was like confirmation for me, like I almost got like permission to go live this dream, And so for me, this thought of like, well, I don't have any money. How am I going to pull this off? It didn't really matter, honestly, at that point, because the thought of being on my deathbed and looking back and being like, when you were 29 years old and there was this thing that you were pretty good at and you really loved doing, why didn't you just try it? And then if you failed, you go back to UPS or get some other job that you hate. You hate it anyway. Who cares? But what if it works out? What if it would have worked out, Justin? And I couldn't live with that, and that far outweighed this idea of like, well, I might fail and I don't really have money. I just had faith, honestly, that if I made this decision, the universe would kind of respond in some way. This for me was like the price of admission was like to take the leap and have this trust fall moment with the universe and see if it would catch me.
Justin called a friend from his time in the film industry and told him he wanted to get back into the world of media, photography, and filmmaking. And his friend asked if he had a portfolio or a website for his work, something Justin hadn't even thought of yet.
He said, that's no good. He said, you need like a website, man. You need to be Googleable. You need to be able to like if someone's like, oh, can I see your work? You need to be able to like hand them a business card with a website on it. Oh yeah, go to my website. It's this. And so like same thing with Instagram. I just treated my Instagram like it was a portfolio. Like I took it very seriously and I curate for years. I spent hundreds of hours on YouTube learning from different people on editing. I mean, when I first started, I was awful. Like for any other photographers out there, like on Lightroom, I would use that dehaze slider like all the way. I thought it looked so cool. My photos were awful when I first started. And that's the thing is like, you're going to be awful. Like when you first start anything, nobody comes out of the womb good at stuff.
Justin's friend had one more seemingly obvious piece of advice.
I always was looking for the easier, softer way. So when my friend said, you need to just start shooting. I don't know what to tell you. It was the last thing I wanted to hear because I knew that implied I needed to actually put some work in. And the thing is I loved this thing so much. Photography was like, it was like a way out, and it was a creative escape for me, you know, where I can blend nature and the outdoors, which I loved and grew up around, you know, and elevate it, you know. And it was like, it's just like fun game almost to like go to these places and make these and try to make a beautiful photograph out of it, you know.
So Justin had the sense that the best way to shoot photos was to immerse himself as much as he could into the places that he loved. And like so many of us, he built out a van and headed west.
Van life was never like I wanted to be a van lifer, I wanted to be an influencer or anything like that. Van life was just like the most practical way to be able to like go out and do this sort of stuff, you know. And so for the first 2 years, like I developed this huge catalog, you know, of landscapes because I was going from place to place to place to place to place pretty much nonstop.
I'm curious like whether you hit a point in that 4 years where you're like, I am this thing. I can actually make the photo I want to make now. I'm able to do what I want with this tool.
I don't know, you know, it's a good question. I think there's been moments where I felt really competent, you know, at it, but I don't think there's ever been a point yet. You know, there's so many times I look at my work and I do now, and I look back and I'm like, man, I'm awful, you know, like
that never goes
yeah,
away.
like this is awful work. What was I thinking? You know, like I can't believe I posted this or I printed this or whatever, you know, like you know, and that's the thing, I guess, as an artist, you know, it's like you are constantly critiquing, you know, but I feel like the way I approach it is I don't, and in most areas of my life, I don't know if it's a good thing, but I'm just like I'm never like satisfied. I'm always trying to go like get a little bit better, get a little bit smarter, get a little bit more experience or whatever. And so I remember one time when I first hit the road, I posted a photo that I made of the view from Monument Valley. And one of my best friends back home, he saw it and he called me and said, man, you're getting pretty good at this, you know. And that was really cool. Or like the commercial photographer that I had worked with before I hit the road, I made a print of, and he was handling my prints at the time. He had, you know, big, beautiful printer, and he was really good at this stuff. And so he was making my prints for me while I was on the road and fulfilling those orders for me when I would have a print order come in. And he took a picture of this huge one of great sand dunes that we had made. And he said, this is beautiful, Justin. And that felt really good. You know, that felt really good. So I get like every now and then I get little reassurance that I am where I'm supposed to be, but I don't know if I ever am like truly satisfied. I mean, forget the van, forget photography, forget any of it. There was a time where like my wildest dream was to just not have to use a drug just to function, you know. So like this is icing on the cake. You know, when you DM'd me and said like, hey, we'd like to have you on the Dirtbag Diaries, my face dropped and I started crying in the gym with a bunch of, you know, grown adults around me, a bunch of big dogs, you know, benching and squatting and stuff. I was in the gym. It was unfortunate for me that you DM'd me when you did. Sorry about my luck. But yeah, I started like crying in front of everybody because all this is a dream. You know, this is all icing on the cake. I'm on borrowed time, I feel like, you know, so I can't tell at what point it's a dream and it's reality, because my whole world was my bedroom for years with like a bag of heroin or some pills.
You know, it sounded like the chapter of coming out, like when you're in the early stages of recovery, right? There was like a level of like you were very grounded, you were very focused, like in terms of like planning my life around a meeting, doing all this stuff. And I know that there's like a certain chaos to travel and movement, and you sort of lose routines and lose habits. Has that ever been hard for you to kind of maintain that stability that you might need to continue recovery, continue being healthy, Like, has there been tensions in that in terms of the last few years?
It's a great question, one that I don't get a lot, but the reality is it has been very difficult. In recovery specifically, so much of it, like I said, like when I went to rehab, I described how like we were all in it together, and I needed to be around those people that were also going through it. When you get into recovery, you build a network, you build a community and a family, really, that you get so deep and intimate with these people, and vulnerable and honest, that to like pick up and leave that for years is very difficult. And now it's one thing to start that in a different area. Like I just moved to San Diego and I'm starting to get plugged into the meetings and the recovery there, and it's been great. But for like 4 years, I didn't have like a base. So not only was my routine of like wake up, go to work, go to the gym, go to a meeting completely thrown off, but like I didn't know anybody anywhere. I didn't know like, oh, on Tuesdays I go to this meeting, or on Thursdays I go to this meeting and this person's going to be there, and oh, I get to see this guy and this person. It was very disorienting, and so for me, I had to stay really connected with my guys in recovery back home, my best friends that are in recovery. We're on the phone. I'm on a phone call with them sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day. That kind of anchors me back. I also have a sponsor that I talk to, probably not as much as I should, but I do. And I still go to meetings, but I would feel like a newcomer at every meeting. I didn't know anybody. It would be very easy to have relapsed and not tell anybody. It really would have. And thank God that's not my story. I never really struggled. There was never a point in which I was like, oh, I think I might drink, or never anything like that. Because I have step work in my life. I have tools in my life. I pick up the phone when I really need to. And I go to a meeting when I really need to. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if I don't know people. It is very challenging. That's not to say it's not possible. I've done it. I've stayed clean. But it is much different being out on the road, traveling full time, and maintaining that sort of sense of well-being, recovery, wellness, and I see a therapist back home too in Jersey. And we do like telehealth sometimes, but that falls off too, and so all of these different things that I do to keep myself clean and happy and sane and free, they take a hit, and it's just a matter of jumping back in when I know I need to, and staying connected, really.
Right now, when you reflect on it and think about it, like, what makes you happiest?
Man, what makes me the happiest? I think when I feel like I'm living my purpose, that makes me the happiest. And most of the time for me, that really comes when I have an opportunity to share my story, and just like live a very authentic life. I just want to be me. I want to be me to my friends, to my family. No more masks, no more facades. Being able to do that and somehow, sort of make a living just doing what I love to do, and having opportunities like this to tell my story, and show up as the same version of Justin in all these different scenarios. That's like that feels very freeing, because I think for a long time I was wearing lots of masks. I was like hiding who I was, and to feel like I don't have to hide who I am anymore. And that's why I'm like very vulnerable. I feel like when I talk to people, both privately, but also, in this sort of a setting, or even on my Instagram, I'm very open about my life. And I think because I'm constantly just seeking to be accepted for who I am. So I put a lot of myself out there. And when I am accepted for who I am, and then I get positive feedback about how somebody can relate to that, or, they needed to hear that, something that I shared, that feels great. That's really one of the best feelings ever.
Thanks to Justin for openly sharing his story. You can follow Justin on Instagram at justpassingthrough. It's also linked to the show notes. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have compelling ideas for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can also email us at editor@ducktapethandbeer.com. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members and to those that continue supporting. Your support makes interviews like this possible. Want another way to help? Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show. Music today from Pine and Oak and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artist or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. You can find the artist at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Fitz and myself and edited by Becca Cahal. Fitz is our creative director and out this week. I'm Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then.
Hey y'all, Diaries producer Lauren Delani Miller here. Thanks for sticking around for another edition of And Then What. We're less than 3 weeks into 2026, and in many ways, all eyes are on Minnesota. While residents in Minneapolis are grappling with violence, immigration enforcement, and threats by President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, lawmakers continue to push forward an agenda that strips protection from public lands, the very places that people often turn to for solace in turbulent times. The Boundary Waters, a wilderness area of over 1 million acres in northern Minnesota, is at risk, again, of being opened up for copper ore sulfide mining. And while the attack may seem local, a vote taking place in Congress as early as next week could set a precedent that would impact public lands protections across the country. Ingrid Lyons, Executive Director of Northeastern Minnesota's for Wilderness and the lead organizer for Save the Boundary Waters, joined us to talk about what's happening and what's at risk. Ingrid, the Boundary Waters is an area that we at the Dirtbag Diaries have come back to time and time again through the many ups and downs in the fight to protect it. So we're recording this on, it's January 15th. Can you bring us up to speed on where things were sitting when we came into the new year?
Yeah, so coming into the new year, we were reflecting on basically a year of legislative threats that were brought forward against protections for the Boundary Waters. So in 2023, then Interior Secretary Deb Haaland signed a Public Land Order 7917, which I refer to as a mineral withdrawal, essentially taking out of the federal mineral portfolio all of the lands and minerals in the watershed of the Boundary Waters for 20 years, which is the maximum allowable by law. So coming into this year, those protections, although they had been directly attacked both through executive orders and through attempts in Congress to overturn them using must-pass legislation like budget reconciliation and appropriations and NDAA, those protections were intact. And it's important to say they're intact right now, but we're facing a completely new threat at the moment.
Yes, and then this week, something changed, something happened. Can you tell us about that?
What we saw was Representative Stauber and the Department of Interior basically initiating a Congressional Review Act process. The Congressional Review Act, just to take a step back, is a law that was passed in 1996 that essentially allows for Congress to evaluate and reject rules put forward by federal agencies. So it has to be a rule to be subject to the CRA. And what the CRA does essentially is, so say an agency creates a rule and they go through all the process to create a rule. They put it in the congressional record, and that starts the CRA clock. It's a 60-day legislative clock. So basically a fast track where any member of Congress can introduce a joint resolution of disapproval, basically saying, I want to turn this rule back. I don't approve of this rule. There are then 60 days to pass that legislation using the benefits of the CRA, which basically are that you only need a simple majority in the House, and the vote is not subject to the filibuster. So it is a mechanism through which it's easier theoretically to pass a resolution of disapproval. The issue here is that public land orders or mineral withdrawals, like we have in the case of boundary waters protections, have never been considered rules subject to the Congressional Review Act. And so now we are looking down the barrel of a potential floor vote on this Congressional Review Act resolution that would overturn the 20-year protections. And importantly, it would also bar any future administration from putting in place a substantially similar rule. So it's kind of all systems go over here.
How is this different from threats that you guys have worked on before?
There's so much that is going on in the public land space that is unprecedented. Laws and procedure and statutes that folks have felt confident in, understood to be solid, reliable decisions or conclusions, are now all up for scrutiny and are all vulnerable to basically the whims of the federal government at this point. I mean, with this particular CRA challenge, one thing that's really important to note is, of course, it would be horrible for the boundary waters, but it also has really far-reaching implications for public lands across the country. You know, if any past agency action is suddenly determined by Congress to be a rule that can be scrutinized and nullified under this expedited process, then no land management plan or decision is safe, which really throws sort of the world of land management and all of its ripple effects and everyone involved into a degree of chaos that is unprecedented. And, you know, what I really love about Minnesotans in particular is that we are a rowdy bunch when it comes to, you know, getting organized and speaking up and fighting back. And I think just like folks have joined us in, you know, speaking against some of the atrocities we've seen in Minnesota over the past week, we'd ask that people join us in solidarity in protecting our most cherished landscape. And so you can take action. You know, we are expecting this vote as soon as next week, the week of January 19th, and it's not a lost vote. So we really need people to be calling, writing to their members of Congress from all over the country, demanding that they not only protect the boundary waters by voting against Joint Resolution 140, but that they fight for the future of all public lands.
All right, team, time to work the phones. You can call 202-224-3121. You do not have to live in Minnesota to act on this one. All of our representatives will have a chance to vote on this, so no matter where you live, your voice matters. Congress has to vote within 60 days, but as Ingrid said, it may happen as soon as the week of January 19th. We'll put a link in the show notes that goes to our And Then What action page. And thanks to Diaries Plus members. Your support makes this reporting possible.